just here in Vilnius in Lithuania, and it has an amazingly rich culture and really friendly people. But of course, like anywhere, there are things that annoy the population here, that tourists do, that travellers do, that people just are unsure of. So let's get into things to avoid when you're here. First up is assuming that Lithuania is still part of the Soviet Union or Russia or that kind of conglomeration of countries. Many tourists mistakenly still think that Lithuania has close links to Russia or the Soviet Union, or don't quite know the region well enough and make those assumptions when they're there. This can be deeply offensive to Lithuanians who fought incredibly hard for their independence. Mentioning the USSR as if it were some nostalgic period, or asking what was it like in Russia before independence, is incredibly ignorant to the struggle that many Lithuanians went through. Lithuania is its own country with a unique history and a unique culture. Even if you see some similarities in architecture or you see some of the history, try and understand it better. Look into the museums and many other public buildings that can give you a breakdown of what goes into Lithuanian culture and its history. If you want to be respectful and have a conversation about the history, acknowledging Lithuania's independence movement and its role in bringing down the Soviet regime, rather than reducing it to a simple satellite state, is going to see you in much better stead. Next up is being too loud in public places. Now, I've said this for a few different places, and this is somewhat normal in a lot of European countries, that being overly loud or brash in public places can be seen as very offensive and just doesn't fit. Lithuanians generally value peace and quiet in public spaces. If you're in a cafe, a restaurant, or even walking through the streets, keep your voice at a normal and lower volume. Now, I've said this before, this does seem somewhat hypocritical, I am quite aware, as I have a relatively loud voice. Now, of course, much of that is to do with camera or because I'm doing audio, but I recognize that I have that voice and I try my best to curb it when I'm in a public place. When I do my addresses to camera on video, I try and make sure that I'm away from the rest of the public, or maybe I'm in a hotel room, or I am off to the side of where I think there will be more thoroughfare, because I want to show respect and I also want to keep my volume down. So sometimes I may even record and then bump the volume up when I do the audio at home, because that shows far more respect. So even if you're doing something like me and you're talking directly to camera, you can still keep your voice down and deal with it afterwards. Loud conversations like shouting across the room or being disruptive on public transport will make you stand out in a very bad way. Public places are for relaxation, not a performance. You're not going to see people on street corners with their tripod out doing TikTok dances in many of the parts of Lithuania. If you're used to being more boisterous and the cultures that kind of embrace that, such as America or parts of the UK as well, be mindful that Lithuania is a much quieter in demeanor and is seen in a more respectful way, rather than being antisocial in the way of being loud and boisterous. On from that, walking in bike lanes. Like much of Europe, Lithuania's cities, especially Vilnius or Kaunas, have clearly marked bike lanes, often on pavements. So tourists frequently walk in these lanes without realizing. That then forced cyclists to swerve or stop suddenly, which can be incredibly dangerous for the cyclist, for other pedestrians, or for road users if they have to swerve off into there. It's not just annoying, it is, as I say, dangerous. Cyclists expect an unobstructed path, and standing in the bike lane for a photo or conversations can cause serious incidents. Always walk on pedestrian sides. If you're unsure, just look down. It literally is just there. Bike lanes are usually marked with clear symbols. Now, we have these a lot in the UK, and you do have them in much of Europe. But in places like Lithuania, like the Netherlands, like Germany, where bikes are far more plentiful, it is very, very important to make sure that you're taking the time to not get in their way, because as I say, you're going to cause a lot of issues that way. And really, it's their right of way. You are in the wrong. Don't turn into a Karen afterwards and start having a go at the cyclist for hitting you or stopping abruptly. You are in the wrong here. Next up is assuming that Lithuania is the same as Latvia and Estonia. Now, I said at the beginning about obviously assuming that it may be part of some kind of link with Soviet Union or Russia. The same kind of applies to Latvia and Estonia. A lot of people can get them interchangeable, thinking where they are, but they are distinct. Yes, Lithuania is a Baltic country, but it's not the same as Latvia or Estonia. Each of these three nations has its own language, traditions, and history. Lithuania and Latvia are related in their languages, but Estonia is actually closer to Finnish, for instance. Lithuania was once a part of a powerful medieval empire stretching as far as Ukraine. The cultures, customs, and even traditional foods are very different between these three. So lumping them together as the Baltics, in a way, that kind of erases their differences, and it's really lazy and frustrating for locals. So take the time to learn more. Go into the museums, of which there are plenty in Lithuania, especially if you're in one of the bigger cities like Vilnius or Kaunas. There is so much history there. You can find out so much more, and the rich traditions. Like I say, even just in the languages, yes, two of them have some similarities, Lithuanian and Latvian, but Estonian off to the side with Finnish. So just the languages alone, you're going to get some confusion there. They are not all to be lumped together. There are distinct individual traditions. It's much like a lot of people will just throw in that Scotland, England, and Wales are all the same. They are not. And again, the history comes with it. And that's the case here. Finally, taking pictures without permission. So, many people will be just used to doing this because they are in that more boisterous, that more outspoken and kind of external look at the world. But privacy is a big deal in Lithuania. You've got to remember the history, and this is where this comes into it. Tourists often take photos of locals without asking, especially in markets, cafes, or rural areas. It's intrusive and incredibly rude. Now, hopefully you will have seen from when I did my pieces to camera, when I've done pieces to camera in my Lithuania video, and I do this with other places depending on where I am, you will see people cross my shot, not the other way around. I will not, at least I will try my best not to cross somebody else's shot, or at least not within a distance that makes them out clearly. If somebody is in my shot, it's generally because they have crossed it, and so they have put themselves into that view, not the other way around, because it is incredibly rude and it's not the norm. Again, you have to remember the history and surveillance history and that kind of idea, and so it's incredibly intrusive, and there's still a nod to their own history and wanting to be private people. Would you want a stranger just snapping pictures of you as you ate lunch? Probably not. If you want to take a photo of someone or a private area, you know, somebody's got an amazing garden, which in some of the villages, very, very likely, I have to say. Just ask. Some people may say yes, others may not. But respecting personal space is important. I remember seeing I think it was a TikTok once about an American girl that had been in Europe for 6 hours and decided that Europeans don't know personal space. That's really dependent on which part of Europe you're in. There's like 50 countries, and I will tell you now, Lithuanians do respect that personal space. Personal space is a big thing for them. So, and that, of course, that can change across the country as well. These are more sweeping statements, but as a culture in general, much more about personal space. For historical or religious sites, also be extra cautious. Many places like the Hill of Crosses are deeply spiritual, and treating them like a photo op without understanding their meaning is pretty offensive. So again, if you're doing something like you're doing a YouTube video, you're doing some kind of documentary, treat it with the reverence it deserves. Whether you agree with it, believe in it, is relevant to understanding its history and its place. Now, there are plenty of other things about Lithuania that you should note and that will annoy people in Lithuania if you're a tourist doing this. As I've said there, personal space is a big one. I could have added that on as a sixth. Being very aware of personal space is a big one indeed. There's many more things. So if you know one, do let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to know what I've missed off there. If you avoid these common mistakes though, and maybe that extra one about personal space, Lithuania is a wonderful and welcoming and friendly place. They appreciate when tourists make an effort to respect the culture, language and customs, as many places across the world will. Just being a little bit mindful goes a very, very long way. If you're from Lithuania and you think I'm wrong on any of these, you think I'm right, you think there's so many more I could do, or I didn't quite understand part of it, let me know. If you know someone, if there's one that you've missed off when you were traveling there, let me know in the comments below. Obviously, this comes a lot from my own experience, from my own travels, and kind of interactions. But please, if you have different views or there's something I missed off, do let me know in the comments below. But hopefully, if you can take heed of these, you're going to have an amazing journey to Lithuania. By far, one of the countries that is kind of topping my list, so it is very much up there. So I hope you enjoy your stay there, and we will see you again next time.